I am so jealous. I am so completely and utterly jealous of all of you native Spanish speakers who get to read Borges in Spanish, the language of his heart. We discovered, such a discovery is inevitable in the late hours of the night, that mirrors have something monstrous about them. Then Bioy Casares recalled that one of the heresiarchs of Ukbar had declared that mirrors in copulation are abominable because they both increase the number of men. Where have I been my entire life? Oh my goodness. Like, I feel like it's 2022. Is it 2022? Yeah, it's 2022. And I am going to remember this as the year that I, a 23-year-old, discovered Jorge Luis Borges. And I feel like I've been living in the dark. I feel like I like all the like reading slumps that I went through, I can't believe that Borges was just like sitting on a shelf somewhere and I could have been reading it. I don't know, maybe this was just fate that this was the year that I discover him, and I feel so enamored. I feel like I've just like touched the tip of an iceberg, and I haven't even, I mean, even this slim volume alone, I definitely didn't even understand everything in it. So I have like miles and miles to go, and you could say that I have, you know, entered infinity. I have entered into the labyrinth, and I don't want to figure a way to get out. I don't want to escape. I just decided to pick up this collection. Now, I picked this up a couple months ago at my local bookstore. This is Labyrinth by Borges, and I think I'd heard the name once or twice. The main reason that I picked it up was for the Library of Babel, La Biblioteca de Babel. And I had read the story many years ago and immediately kind of became enamored and obsessed with the whole idea of this infinite library. I meant like this, the imagery and the kind of like itch in my brain and the type of like vivid imagination that there's like awoke in me of the Library of Babel, which is a very famous story of his, probably one of his most like famous works. And if you haven't read it, you just need to go, it's not that long, you just need to go read it right now. And the kind of like passion that the story ignited in me, I like became very obsessed with this whole idea for like a while, a couple of years ago. And I remember like telling my whole family about it, and I remember playing like a beta version of a game that somebody had made where you can kind of like walk around the corridors of this infinite library. And of course, if you've read Borges or have Borges and have, you know, been in the sphere of his literature, of at least that story, then you've probably heard of the website, the Library of Babel. And I remember like spending hours on that, just, you know, messing around and flipping through the pages. I meant, it's just such an accomplishment of imagination and of like, I don't know, bibliophiles around the world have still not recovered. So anyway, I had read that many a year ago, and I kind of didn't continue my Borges journey after that. I kind of just stayed on that kind of shelf of reading him. I, you know, kind of obsessed with that story for a while, and I kind of just, you know, moved on with my life. I never really even, I don't even think it really crossed my mind to kind of like read any of his other work or anything until recently, when I decided that I was going to try to tackle The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, which I'm currently reading right now and is absolutely amazing so far. I cannot wait to like keep reading and talk about it. But I had heard, a little birdie told me that that novel was kind of loosely based or inspired by La Biblioteca de Babel. So I was like, I saw this at my local bookshop and I was like, oh yeah, let me grab this. Of course, it included the Library of Babel in here. So I was like, I just want to have this so I can reread that story like once or twice before I decide to read Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, so that's kind of where my whole mindset was. So I decided recently that I did want to read it, which I am currently reading it now, but before I was going to read it, I was like, let me read this. So obviously I didn't just flip to wherever they had the Library of Babel in here. I was like, let me just read some Borges while I'm here. I decided to, and my life has been changed forever, guys. That's the least I can say. Quick thing before I even talk about this, William Gibson had a really nice like introductory section to this book that really made me want to read his work as well. A coworker of mine many years ago wrote like a list. I literally still have the list of books that I should read. And Gibson was on there, Neuromancer was on there, and I just kind of never got to him. But after reading his introduction to this work, I'm also very interested in reading him as well. And just to know that he has such a passion for Borges kind of just ignites me to want to see what he's done in, you know, the world of literature as well. But anyway, so I just decided to just dive in. I had basically, as you can see, like no background in knowing about Borges at all. Again, I've heard about him. I know he like pioneered some magical realism in like Latin America, that type of stuff. But once again, did not know much about him. And the first story in this collection was Tlon Uqbar Orbis Tertius. And wow. Just reading that story, which is the quote from that I read from the beginning, I just knew I was going to be in for a ride. And I definitely was. I can't explain what a complicated fabric of subject matter and philosophy and ideas that he had going on in his head and that he weaved throughout his stories. It's just, I feel like it's everything I've ever wanted. Just this almost surreal, absurd, magical realism just tied in with all of these amazing ideas. I mean, he was famously kind of obsessed with this idea of infinity and of kind of like parallel universes and the philosophy of self and of singularity and of all of these things, and they come through so beautifully in reading his work. I am still, like I said, only scratching the surface. I don't really like reading works that are super like philosophically heavy in a way that is like textbook style, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like he definitely goes there in certain stories, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I don't really have much to say about them anyway since I didn't understand them. But like the first story, Tlon Uqbar Orbis Tertius, I mean, I'm sure there's many interpretations of what this story exactly is about, but basically he's kind of exploring the reality of the world. If you can say there's one singular reality versus how any specific ideology or set of ideas that any one person has, how that has the weight of the lives that we actually live. And I think it's also just a very beautiful ode to the power of language and the power of literature and how the story folds out. And like that original quote that I read about, oh my God, just so magnificent. Like how he's comparing the reflection of a man as seen in a mirror to the birth of a man as both increasing the population. But only one does, really, right? The birth of the man is the only thing that can increase the population, not a mere reflection of him. Or is it? And these are the kind of ideas that he dissects, and I mean, it's amazing to get to see him dissect like specific uses of language, because a lot of the story has to do with language and this kind of imaginary place that had been thought up or conjured by all of these men, and its effect on the real physical world. And once I finished that story, I immediately just flipped back and started rereading it because I was just gone. I was gone. I was so like sucked in by all of these ideas. I am so jealous. I am so completely and utterly jealous of all of you native Spanish speakers who get to read Borges in Spanish, the language of his heart. Even reading these translations of his work, I feel like you guys get even a more singular and beautiful experience reading it as the words came out and were penned by his hand. I'm so jealous. I'm still incredibly grateful that I even get an English translation, and these were incredibly beautiful to me at every turn, but I'm still super jealous of anybody who gets to read him, like I said, in the language of his heart, because I bet that is just such an experience. The stories in here span from many different subject matters. A lot of them tie into the idea of, like I said, infinity or labyrinths, and all of them are not only smart, they're creative and they're beautiful. I marked my favorite ones. My favorite ones specifically from this edition upon my first reading, which is definitely not going to be my last, were, if anyone's interested in, the first story, Tlon Ukbar Orbis Tertius, Pierre Menard, the author of the Quixote, which I thought was amazing. I'm trying to decide like how in depth I want to go into like each of this, because there's so much content in here. I kind of just want to give a general view of as in like go and pick this book up and read it. The Circular Ruins, obviously the Library of Babel, Funes, the Memorias, and the House of Asterion. Can we talk about the House of Asterion for just like one quick second? I was in my room, I think it was like 11 o'clock. I had to be at work in like mere hours, but I sat there, tears streaming down my face, as I think I read the House of Asterion 4 times. I sat there and I read it 4 times, which is, if you don't know, it's kind of like a very quick short retelling of Greek mythologies, Theseus and the Minotaur, as told from the Minotaur's perspective. And it absolutely blew me to smithereens. I was so emotionally affected by the story. It means so much to me, and I can literally start crying right now if I wanted to, but I'm gonna try to hold it together. It was all of that to me. There's so many different ideas in here that were so new to me and so beautifully explored that like I said, I haven't even touched it really. Like in one of my favorite stories from this collection, Pierre Menard, the author of the Quixote, which explores, it's kind of like a short story that kind of critiques literary criticism, which is so meta, if you will, about this character who wants to live his life as closely as he can to Cervantes in order to spontaneously write Don Quixote, not copy it, but spontaneously write it himself by basically aligning himself as closely as he can to Cervantes, and he ends up actually doing it. And the kind of flip that Jorge Luis Borges gives us in like this other critique of comparing, or like the narrator or so-and-so comparing the 2 books even though they're exactly the same, but how his understanding of the work and the nuances that he as the narrator feels like the work brings forth is so dependent on what he knows about the author. It seems like such a basic idea, right? But I don't know why the story so vividly brought that out to me, and in this kind of thing that he also explores in some of his other stories. Like, what is the one I'm gonna have to find the quote, but whichever story quoted, like, does the man write the story, does the story write the man, something akin to that. How really our ideas can have such a tangible effect on what seems like physical space, and how like something that you understand now in the present changes something that already happened, that already exists in its own time and space. And I feel like that was kind of touched on in, it wasn't Tlon Ukbar Orbis Tertius, where he says, centuries and centuries of idealism have not failed to influence reality. In the most ancient regions of Toulon, the duplication of lost objects is not infrequent. Two persons look for a pencil. The first finds it and says nothing. The second finds a second pencil, no less real, but closer to his expectations. As in, these two people who are looking for one object both find the original object. And it's just absolutely crazy to see how this kind of stuff can like affect real life. Like, it seems abstract, but at the same time it's not, and it seems mythical, but at the same time it's really not. And I feel like even upon reading his work, like, he helped me understand some of his work kind of based on the singular idea of self. And if one man did it, then all men did it. And like, he has also that famous quote about, if one man like recites Shakespeare, he is Shakespeare, or something like that. Just because I don't know, I almost hesitated making this video just because he is very like erudite to me. Especially, I've already admitted, like, there are many stories in here which I think went completely over my head. One of them was the Zahir, which I think literally has like references like 6 other pieces of literature that I have never even heard of in my entire life. And those kind of stories that were kind of scattered throughout this thing felt very much like reading a textbook in a language that I didn't understand. And I didn't get anything from those stories because of my lack of knowledge. He is a very educated man. He was a very educated man, and he has so many historical references and biblical references, which I do consider myself biblically educated in a lot of sense. But even all these references like had gone straight over my head, but I still feel like they're sitting there for me. And if I want to go back and explore, I know that I'm going to be able to go in there and really get something amazing out of it. And it just kind of just goes to ode for like the name of this collection and this idea that he had mentioned multiple times throughout his stories of labyrinths. And I feel like this book and his work really is a labyrinth, and I can explore it, and I can get hopelessly and joyfully lost in it. And I feel so lucky. Like, I've gone crazy. I feel like I've just been living in the dark since I've not read him. I'm so excited to read more of his book. I think I'm going to buy like the full collection of his like fictional short stories. He never wrote a novel, which I think he said he felt like he couldn't, but I think that would have been absolutely amazing if he did, and I for sure would have ate that up. I want to read his poetry, which is more of his early work. I went to the bookstore. I'd be going to the bookstore like every week, but I had seen like a collection of his like nonfiction essays in a very thick volume that I decided to kind of skip on just because I want to kind of go more into his fiction before I go into that side of things. But I mean, this collection did include some of his nonfiction, but I can confidently say that I've been forever changed, and I cannot recommend him enough. I don't think this is a video you want to come to if you're looking for me to dissect Borges and all of his complicated, beautiful ideas. But this is just me in my pure excitement, discovering him for the first time at 23 years of age, and I could not be happier. Library of Babel stayed on absolute 10. It was everything that I remembered it to be, and I hope it adds like just a little bit more, even if it's just a slight bit more context as I work my way through The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, which is really doing it for me right now. This is my first Eco that I will be reading, so I'm also super excited about that. And I'm also super interested to read more of the kind of, you know, grandfathers who pioneered magical realism in Latin America and all the people who were also influenced by him. I just want to kind of follow that train throughout literature, and I am so glad that I'm starting here and get to kind of like work my way around to other authors. So I feel like I have a lot of places to go, and I'm so happy and I'm so excited. And I feel like I just want to like lay back and like stare into the abyss and really try to dissect what it is that I've stumbled upon here in my small little life. I think I probably just said a whole lot of nothing. But, y'all, I think this is what it feels like to fall in love. And as always, happy reading, losers.